record to the cloud. And I'll just introduce us and then wanted to turn the floor over to Kristin. So it's such a pleasure to have Kristin join us today. And for those of you listening on record, you won't be part of our conversation, but hopefully can benefit from it. Kristin is a coach and a speaker and someone who has a multitude of talents. But today we're going to be talking about spirituality in a non-denominational way, because many of y'all on your applications requested some spiritual support with regards to mental health and how spirituality is a positive aspect of mental health that we can bolster and that we can draw on in challenging times. We wanted to offer kind of a non-denominational look at how you can boost the light inside of you. And so Kristin's going to lead us in just a discussion and some presentation of things to think about on that level today. And I know she doesn't want to talk the whole time, so feel free to communicate, add questions, jump in. I think there's a chat box, but we can probably make this a conversation since we're going to be a small group. And I'm going to try and minimize the view of me and keep, but I think the camera will be on whoever is speaking. Although right now it's on Ayana and not big on my screen. So that's what's recording right now. So I don't know, we'll try to figure out a way to make this a little more Kristin focused and not Susan focused or even Ayana focused. But anyway, welcome, Kristin. I'll let you introduce yourself as far as kind of your whatever you want to reveal about your many professional settings, rather than go into that myself. So welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Susan. And just to I'm not going to get into my professional background as much because you really don't want to hear that. But what I will tell you about is kind of my spiritual journey, because I think that's very relevant to what we're talking about. And it is intertwined with my professional journey. Like everybody's is. We are all spirit and we're all connected. And so to parse yourself out and be like, this is my one self and this is my other self, it actually doesn't work that way. So I got really, first of all, I should disclose that my father is a Presbyterian minister, and Presbyterians are called the Frozen Chosen. We have a lot in common with the Lake Lobegon Lutherans. You know, we're just kind of not the most, if you come to church, it's just kind of boring. And early in high school, I started wanting to see how different spiritual practices were really practiced. How did people practice their faith, or how did they practice their spirituality? And I went to everything. I was wide open. It was more an information gathering session for me. When I went to Carolina, I actually toyed with the idea of being a religion major, but religion didn't capture everything for me. So I ended up being an anthropology major and looking at how spirituality, and in particular rites of passage, impacted people throughout their lifetime. So it's been something I've just loved and really been fascinated by for a long period of time. If you read the initial description, it talks about our lives being kind of like stained glass and spirit being the light that shines through the stained glass. When I think of religion as kind of the stained glass. It's kind of the MO or the modality you use to access your spirituality. But your spirituality is inside you. It's not just an outside religion coming in. It's you are spirit. That's my belief. And I should disclose, if you are uncomfortable with anything I say, just let me know. I'm telling you where I have come on my spiritual journey. Your journey is going to be so different. Everyone's is so different, and it's so unique to that individual. Please honor your own beliefs. Please honor your own journey. That is, if you hear nothing else, hear that, because that's the beauty of spirit. It moves through everyone so differently, and I'm always amazed what that looks like. So hello, welcome. Oop, we had someone who came in for a moment. And Ayana is the only one here, so I'm just going to get a kind of a question from her. So Ayana, in this talk on authentic spirituality, what type of thing intrigued you the most, or what are you most interested in learning about or talking about?
I think that I would be most interested in, I'm not sure how to word this, but I guess background wise, I grew up kind of split between a Catholic and a Baptist household.
Okay.
And so, like, you know, most of my family was Baptist, but then I would walk into my grandmother's bedroom and there's Pope John Paul II on the wall. And then I was in Catholic school and then non-denominational Christian school. It was just a lot.
Yeah, it would have been for sure.
And I love Catholicism in my own way, but I also kind of went through a period of, I guess I had like trauma associated with like the Catholic Church and Catholic schooling, and I just kind of want to find peace and find that like love again, and not associate anything negatively. I want to recapture the spirit of, you know, Catholicism that I always loved when I was younger. And I know that this isn't like specifically about that, but I think that finding the positivity and the heart of things is what's most important for me.
Anna, you've just encapsulated so much in what you just said, and your journey, I think, is emblematic of a lot of people's journeys. The church has a particularly unique way of turning religion into a judgment-oriented, traumatic, it can be, existence. And to your point, spirit is joyful. And so when you come in and you're young and you're like, I love everyone, and we sing Jesus loves me, and you know, that kind of a thing, it's like, oh, I get this, it makes so much, I love you, and you're like embracing all this stuff. And then Catholic or Baptist, it really, you know, you can pick your forum, Judaism, Muslim, it doesn't, they're all going to have these rules that get applied to how you're supposed to then live. And those rules separate us from that love, because suddenly what you thought was organic to you and this love in your heart, you're told, is not actually, you know, in Christianity, it's a sin. You know, it can take on many different forms. But in Catholicism, it's interesting because they, you know, Catholics are known for having this guilty complex. Jews are known for having kind of the, you know, the guilt, the Jewish mother can make you feel guilty for anything. And you see religion kind of manipulate different constructs into getting behaviors they want, which is so foreign to what, in my opinion, spirit is all about. Spirit is all about exactly what you were saying, Ayana. It's about that joy. It's about being authentic to who you are, because you are loved in spirit, wholly, organically, and truly all the time. So how do we get that piece back? The church has done some great things. You know, they do help develop some type of a consciousness, which is important. We do want to be thoughtful about what we do, what we say, who we are. And we do want those two, who we are and what we say, to be congruent with each other. So I want to thank you so much for bringing that up, because I think you're spot on. And I love that you were doing the Southern Baptist and Catholic thing, because that was an interesting line to walk. Just if you're unfamiliar with Catholicism, one of the things that has that's different than the rest of the kind of Protestant faiths is that Catholicism is built around the idea that God talks to the Pope, and then the Pope then talks to people beneath you know, the archdiocese or whatever. And you just kind of keep, it's like a pyramid. And so the Pope has the greatest connection to God. Whereas the Baptists believe that it's centered around baptism, right? When you get baptized, it's a choice you make. In the Presbyterian church that I came out of, we baptize babies. The Baptists do not do that. They baptize adults or kind of people in their, believe it or not, a big time for spirituality is around 13 years old. And that's where you see kind of a lot of these rites of passage, which is what baptism is, being established within youth. And that's when you see people choosing to be baptized in the Baptist church, which I actually really, really appreciate, because you're going in consciously. When you're an infant, you don't necessarily go in consciously. But then I just want to be clear that it is not my belief that anyone who is not baptized doesn't have access to God. So it doesn't make sense to me. Kind of pulling back from what you're saying, I think you also gave the answer to what we're going to be talking about in your question, Ayana, which is, if you want to be aligned with spirit and kind of walk away from the religious programming, if you will, the most important thing you can do is follow your joy. It's to follow what brings you happiness. That seed is in you. It is your spirit. It is going to drive you for expression. The reason you are here is to express your spirit. That is what this is all about, and to have that expression out into the world. The way I talk about it is, if you go to a pasture and the pasture has flowers in it and the flowers are blooming, it is so beautiful. Like, it's breathtaking. And that's what the spirit is. When the spirit blooms, it's just breathtaking. We all just love to see it when the spirit moves, you know, and the person just moves to that space. Now, flowers don't really give two hoots about what the flower next to it is doing. And that's the beauty of it. They're not looking at the flower next to them going, well, what color do you have on? Because I have on this color. Maybe I want to be in your color. Like, they just don't care. And we have those seeds within us that's harder to keep not caring. But we do have that seed within us, and that the sun, if you will, is the joy. What brings you joy? And if we follow that piece, everything else moves into alignment. So that is something I just want to honor about what you say, and also to be one of the primary takeaways from this conversation. Follow what brings you joy. It's follow your bliss. You can, you know, follow your light. Any way you want to say it, you can. Now, I see we have two other callers on, and I don't see their names. But callers, do you have any questions you want to talk about during this time?
I'm Danetta. I have no questions. I'm listening at the moment, and I'm only in for a short time, so thank you for asking.
Well, thank you for joining for the time that you have. We really appreciate it. All right. Okay. So what I want to talk about just a little bit at this time is what spirit is. So spirit is the creative energy of God. You were born with it. You were born from it. You were come from God. And I do believe that. In Christianity, we call it, you know, God the Father. Like, this is, and I think of Mother as kind of being that creative energy. So you are here to express that piece of you. Now, to me, creation may look a little bit different than what people think about with, like, you know, you may think of arts and crafts, you may think of writing a song. I don't think of it as that way. I think of it as creating the world we want to live in. So for me, it's a lot more than that. And I've actually written a book about that. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about mentorship and what creation looks like, in my opinion. So to me, one of the most creative mentors in our society is Martin Luther King. When it comes from somebody who is truly honoring his faith and in an extraordinary way, but he was creating the world he wanted to see. He was piggybacking off of some of the work of Gandhi in India, who also was experiencing oppression from the English government, the Indian government was. And you saw King take a lot of Gandhi's work and apply it in his own situation. The reason for bringing him up is because you're looking at, within you is a vision. It may not be a vision for like his vision, but you're going to have, if you're in touch with spirit, you're going to have something you want to bring to the world that's going to make it better. You're going to be passionate about whatever it is. And that may be found in the work that you're doing in the nonprofit you're in. It may be, you may have complete value alignment with it, or it may not be. The key is to hold that vision and hold your actions in alignment with it. So that is super, super important. If you do not have that vision, if you do not have the value alignment to start with, it's harder than to pull it all the way through. And often you can find your own vision for a better world based on your own life experience. So if you look at some of the things in politics right now, there's a lot of women who have a lot of repressed memories coming up, or a lot of things going on right now about sexual harassment. They're going to be pushing harder for a world that is void of that. Like you're going to see more women start to push against that, because that's their vision now for a better world. And so it's very common to see people whose life experiences take them in this path and really ignite that spirit within them. So that's one way you can think about, how do I get to what brings me joy? It brings me joy to live in a world where I'm not judged. It brings me joy to live in a world where I don't have to fear for myself. It brings me joy to live in a world, and you can take that anywhere. And it can also be a creative thing. It brings me joy to live in a world that has ice cream in it. It brings me joy to live in a world with electricity. Like, all your inspirations are going to come from that joy point. This is the world I want to live in. I want to live in a world like this. It's going to be value. It's going to be, it's going to encompass everything. So when you're moving to authentic spirituality, part of your authenticness is going to be in alignment with that. It's going to need to be in alignment with that, or you're going to feel like what you're doing is meaningless. And this is important because you can be working at the exact same job as somebody else. And I'll give you an example. There was a man walking down the street, and he talked to 3 different people. He came up to the first one and he said, "What are you doing?" And the guy said, "I am laying bricks." And he went to the second one and he said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I am building a wall." And he went to the third one and he said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I am building a cathedral." So what you're doing, actually, they're all doing the same job, but the way they feel about it, the emotional engagement they have in what they're doing is completely different. And you can tell the last one was in full alignment. Like, he just saw each step he was taking as building something glorious, where the other guy was just like, "Yeah, I'm laying bricks, whatever, doesn't matter." So you can be in a position or a role where you have, where you're just laying bricks, or you can have another one where you feel like everything you're doing is building something grand. It's just building something that honors the spirit so much. So I think that's an important piece to keep in mind as you go through and you move into this kind of authenticity with spirit. So that's one thing. Any questions or comments about that? I have a cold, so I'm going to take a couple sips of tea. Okay. I'll keep going. So another piece of dealing with and moving into a place of spirituality and authenticness is moving into a state of integrity. So if you think of the first step as kind of getting in touch with your creative side, the second step is going to be focused on integrity. And I'm not talking about the type of integrity where you are, you know, who you say is what you are and what you say is who you are, as much as the integrity of integrating all of the aspects of your life that you possibly can. And I'm just going to point to recent events because they seem to be out there so much. You're seeing somebody who is on, I'm thinking of Kavanaugh right now, and what's come up is this aspect of alcohol. And that, to me, the way that it's being presented, and I'm not saying anything positive or negative about it, but that would be an unintegrated aspect. Any behaviors that you have, any past that you have, anything that you've done that remains unintegrated into your psyche is liable to trip you up as you move into this authentic state. As so the spirit is incredibly powerful. It's just when you see someone in full alignment, they are completely unstoppable. Like there's nothing you're going to be able to do to get them off their game. If you have these unintegrated aspects, you can be knocked off your game because somebody can then pull them back up. You do not have to, I'm just going to, because Kavanaugh's so readily in my mind right now, you just have to own them. You don't have to dress them up and put a, they always say put a lipstick on pig, it's still a pig. You don't have to put lipstick on. You just have to figure out how are you going to own these aspects of self? Because we all are human, so we are not created perfectly. And so we go out and we do these things that we realize, oh, geez, that's not in alignment with who I want to be. That is how we learn. So there's actually nothing wrong with stepping out as much as you come back and you then own it. When I worked in high schools for a long time, and I had this girl right before prom, and she came in my office and she was just bawling and just crying and crying and crying. So I'm sitting there going, okay. So in my role as a school counselor, I'm like, did she just get dumped by her prom date? And now like she got the dress and, like I had no idea where we were going to go with this conversation. So when she calmed down, I was like, okay, so, tell me what's going on. And it was so interesting what she said. She said, when I started senior year, I'm going to call her Tammy and I'll call this other girl Julie. She goes, I was such a bitch to Julie. I was so mean to her. And then she's crying. She's talking about how awful she was to Julie and how bad she felt about it. And I was like, okay, so this is clearly somebody who's got this unintegrated aspect of behavior that they engaged in. How do we then pull it back so that she can move on from this? And clearly something needs to happen. Julie needs an apology or something because this isn't, I'm sure being treated that way was not going to be a good thing for Julie. So I called Julie down to my office and Julie saw Tammy in there and she's like, basically, what is this about? Like, are you going to, and Tammy sat there and just gave her this tearful apology. I'm so sorry. I was so mean. I just feel so bad and And Julie was like, yeah, you were. and that's as warm and fuzzy as that whole thing got, but the apology was made and Julie walked out. But now what happened is that particular aspect had been neutralized. It no longer had reign over Tammy. Tammy was able to step away from it. She had owned it. She knew that she didn't like that part of herself. She had apologized for it. Julie had, in her own way, accepted it, but also acknowledged, yeah, you were pretty bad. And that was the end of it. So when we have those aspects in our psyche that are unidentified, then we run into trouble. The other time we can run into integrity issues is when we, it's not just past behaviors, it can be present behaviors too. Debt can make us, when we get into serious debt, and then we have to behave in ways that makes us not who we would naturally be because of that, of somebody, it's basically someone else having ownership over you. One of the parallels I draw, and Susan may remember this from our college days, but when I think of the United States, I think we have an addiction is oil. We act a certain way because we've got to have it. And anytime you have an addiction, anytime you have anything that has control over your behaviors, and you are not in control of your behaviors, you are dealing with a place of being out of integrity. You're just not integrated at that point because you can't come to the place to whatever decisions need to be made in the fullness of your power. Another way you're going to see that, and this will actually go into my third piece, but you'll see that with other people too. If you're in an unhealthy relationship with somebody, where you know it's unhealthy and you don't know how to regain balance of that, that can also be an indication that you're going to be moving into a place where you're out of integrity with who you truly are. And when I say who you truly are, I'm not talking about like I'm truly the person who wants the toilet seat put down or, the socks picked up off the floor. Like I'm talking like the overall who you are in a greater capacity. So you're a creator, You need to integrate your energies, positive and negative, so that you have the strength to move forward. The third thing you want to do to be authentic to your spirit and have authentic spirituality is going to be along the lines of connecting with your creative passion, whatever that may look like. And your creative passion is actually going to be something you'll be in touch with. I'm watching Ayana has a young person with her. It's born in you. So it's going to be found early in you. It's going to be found how you play, what games are interesting to you, what activities you enjoy doing. If you look at somebody like J.K. Rowling, so she started writing when she wrote her first book when she was 8 years old. But she didn't give herself permission to think of herself in that way, because that wasn't the narrative that her parents had written for her. The story her parents had written for her sent her off into being a secretary. That was the goal. They wanted her to have the keys to the executive bathroom. And if you were a secretary, you got keys to the executive bathroom. So that's how her parents wrote her story. Well, that story didn't pan out very well for her. She ended up not following her passion and ended up on social welfare. And that was the time she finally got her book done and created a whole new narrative for her life, both literally and figuratively, when you had the whole Harry Potter thing come out. What makes Harry Potter so interesting is that she came up with the idea when she was on a train. There's spirits constantly, in my opinion, connecting with you if you're open to it. She's open to it on a train, and suddenly she describes it like a download. Suddenly the whole story kind of comes to her, and I don't know how, because those books are amazing. But she gets the whole idea for Harry Potter, but it's been after a lifetime of writing. She didn't just wake up one day, get on the train and go. She wrote stories about bunnies. She studied classics, like everything that her parents wanted her to do, she didn't want to do, but she stayed true to herself. She may have lied to her parents about her college major. She majored in classics, and I think they wanted her to major in like business or something. But that is spirit speaking, and that's so, so important to remain in contact with that and give it an outlet. This is particularly true if you have any music aptitudes, by the way. So anyone who listens to this, if you have any music aptitudes, you've got to honor those. Music is one of the few aptitudes that if you don't honor it, it really will drive you crazy. It really, really will make your life miserable. It's just, there's a couple aptitudes that demand expression. Music happens to be one of them, which is perfect for my next segue. So far we've talked about creation, we've talked about integrity, we've talked about finding whatever your particular passion is and giving yourself permission to disconnect from those who don't see your passion as worthy of you or don't see you as worthy of your passion. There's a lot of mom messages that can get in there, mom or dad messages of, well, we always thought this for you. We always wanted you to be a lawyer. I see this particularly true. You'll see it in some populations where the parents are really driving, tiger moms and dads are driving the kids for particular behaviors or whatever. And it can be a really tough place to stand, is in your passion. But that is your spiritual right to stand in that. The fourth piece I want to bring in is tied around intuition. So spirit speaks to all of us in many different ways. And my favorite mentor for this particular thing is Beethoven. And the reason, and you'll like this, Ayana, the reason I like Beethoven so much in this space is because he wrote Ode to Joy. And Ode to Joy is one of the most popular songs in the world. It's the national anthem for Japan and Germany, I believe. It's played at every wedding. It is a very, very powerful song. Not only did he write Ode to Joy, but he wrote Ode to Joy when he was deaf. So when you think about that, he never heard it. He never heard that song, which all of us could, it's if you're in the church, you sing it. It's a bunch of different hymns it's written to. We're all very familiar with it. What he did is he really annoyed his neighbors. He would bang on his table, or he would put a piece of wood in his mouth and kind of bang around and try to get the right part of the symphony. Now, he had a whole background. He'd written many, many symphonies. This certainly wasn't his first. But if we want to talk about what intuition is at the its fullest extent, that's going to be it. It's going to be at that Ode to Joy. How do you write Ode to Joy when you're deaf? Like, seriously, how do you write that when you're deaf? You can't write it unless you're getting the music from somewhere else. There's simply no way you can do it. There is no physical way that you can write a song when you can't hear it. So Spirit will speak through music is one of the most amazing ways. And a lot of us can connect to that because we hear songs and it changes our spirit. It changes our mood. We're like, oh my gosh, I love this song. It's such a great song. And we connect with it. Music is emotion. It can make us feel ways we can't even describe. We just don't have the words to describe it on, good or bad or whatever. So there's this real interplay with intuition and music. I find myself sometimes I'll just be doing something and I'll suddenly have a song in my mind. And I'll tell you an example of this. I was going to California, and I just kept hearing the song as an 80s. So I'm out of the 80s, right? So it's probably I don't know, REO Speedwagon or some of the schmaltzy bands of the 80s. And it's the line is, one lonely night is all it takes to completely break you. And I could not get this song out of my head. I don't listen to the 80s music regularly, but I do have all of the riffs in my head from that time period. So we get out to California. I've now had the song in my head for 3 days. I don't even particularly like the song. And I end up seeing a man whose wife had died. And I took one look at him, and he is just bawling. And I'm like, oh, that's what that song was about. It was kind of a warning to let me know that I was about to see one of the loneliest people in the whole world. And so your intuition can kind of work that way. For some people, at least sometimes that's what I get. It doesn't happen very often. Obviously, I remember when it does. But we all have records in our head of things we remember, and sometimes music says those things better. Sometimes you might be walking along someone and, maybe it's someone you really like, and suddenly you're singing, I'm walking on sunshine or whatever. So music is one way that your spirit will talk. Another way, sometimes people get visions, people get, I'm not even talking who was it Joseph that had the visions? I'm not talking about those. I'm talking more you'll have daydreams. You'll have imaginings of oh my gosh, that would be so amazing if we did that. Sometimes they're metaphorical. If you look at Dr. King's speech, his I have a dream speech, you see it, there's a lot of metaphor used. But these visions are also informing you of where you want to go. These daydreams are informing you of what your spirit wants. Assuming Spirit's only going to work in everyone's best interest. Let me be clear about that. If you have anything that you're thinking of that's not in all best interest, that's not Spirit. But Spirit will have, if you see yourself in doing this great thing, follow that. That's your joy point. That is Spirit telling you that's where you can be. That's where you can go. Another way Spirit will talk to people is through emotion. And this can be kind of difficult if you are an empathic person. Emotions are contagious. We know that. Depression's contagious. We know this from mental health research. Happiness is contagious. You are susceptible to whatever the group around you has. So if you happen to be one of these empathic people and you happen to be in an environment which is not healthy, you have to be very careful about managing your own boundaries, to the point you even might want to imagine boundaries being set up. Because you will, if that is the way Spirit connects with you, you are going to be bombarded all the time. You're going to be able to read other people's emotions. You're going to be engaged in a way that you may not want to be. So just be super, super aware of that. But it also, I use it sometimes in my counseling because I can help sometimes people put words around their emotions, because sometimes that can be super hard. And spirit is one way that allows that to happen. It allows the dream to kind of come through by feeling your way through it. To Ayana's point, this joy, being able to feel the joy, being able to articulate the joy, seeing the joy points as little breadcrumbs to what your potential, what your purpose, what your passion, what all that looks like. That is another way that spirit speaks, is through the emotions. And then some people have super strong spiritual connection just naturally. They may get chills. Has anyone on the call gotten chills before? Yeah. You know, you just feel it and you're like, oh, I think I'm on to something. That is certainly the way spirit is speaking. It's like this, you can't define it, connection. It's electricity almost that moves. You know, you can call it Holy Spirit, you can call it whatever connects with if you're in a religious framework. But that is certainly a way spirit speaks. Sometimes people also get physical sensations, and you'll feel this in the binocular or see it in the binocular of different arenas. So you may hear like, oh, you know, this job is like a ball and chain on my ankle, or I just feel so tied up with everything. If you start to listen to people's words, I'm walking on clouds, anything like that, those are also ways that spirit can connect and give you a sense of what's going on and what you're encountering. And the kinesthetic is kind of an interesting way. So if you're a kinesthetic person, you're going to pick up on those a little bit easier.
Hey, Kristin, let me jump in. I'm really intrigued by what you said about the empaths and how, you know, with depression and happiness being contagious, you know, in DC and with this pilot, we're dealing with a lot of folks that either are actually dealing with secondary trauma every day or just empathetically absorbing the negative energy that's coming at us from all directions in our nonprofit work. Mm-hmm. And, you know, thankfully for you, you're in North Carolina and not in the negative vortex of DC, but we're all here. And so I'm curious if you have some, you know, when you said when you're counseling, you help people put words around those emotions, you know, are there tips and tricks that you can pass on to us to, you know, bolster or maintain our spirit when it feels like we're being bombarded, or when we're naturally empathetic people and absorbing this negativity?
Absolutely. And let me just say too, I lived in DC for over a decade, and I worked in the nonprofit world in DC we did community organizing around hazardous waste. So when people are dying of hazardous waste exposure, there's a lot of feelings there. So what I would say is most helpful in this situation is almost to disconnect and see it from above. So when you move into a space with somebody, the first thing that you can do for somebody, the first gift you can give to somebody is to hear them and to fully listen to them and to be present with them and to hear what they're saying. And often what they say and what they mean are their levels. So somebody may say something, but they may mean something different that's much more deep down. And you want to be able to get in that space with them so they know that you understand what they're going through. Now, keep in mind, you cannot help somebody by getting down there. You can only help them by showing them how to get out of there. But it doesn't mean you cannot acknowledge where they are and validate in that moment where they are. When somebody feels validated, they begin to trust you because you are able to understand what it is they're going through in that moment. And if they cannot trust you, they will not tell you anything. And people have a way of testing with the trust thing. They'll like throw out some little thing. And if you don't pick up, they're not going to divulge any more information. But if you pick up on that and you say, well, tell me more about this. Tell me what this means to you. Or if somebody says, I'm so frustrated. My boss is just yelling at me because we don't have enough money. There's a total stress because I remember when I worked in a nonprofit, money always seemed to be the issue. What are the, and they're kind of dealing with that, just saying, okay, so what are you saying is your boss is really stressed out right now, and her stress is then being put on you. The organization doesn't have enough money, so she's stressed she's not going to be able to keep you. You're stressed because you're not sure that she'll be able to keep you. And then if you can really validate what they say by that, then you're going to get a lot more information. Now, keep in mind, you cannot help anyone if you go down in the doldrums with them. There's no way to make somebody feel bad or feel good by you feeling bad. It doesn't work that way. Your goal is to show them how to move into alignment with their spirit. Their spirit is joyful. Their spirit is whole. Their spirit is confident. Their spirit is loving. So it's giving them that message of, I know this is a bad time. I understand why. And always go, so people are experts on themselves. And that's something that's important to keep in mind. Ask them how they can see themselves coming through that space. What does that look like if you were to come out the other side? How would that look for you? Give them the question so that they can access their own spirit and their own resources and begin to use that. That is truly how you're able to lift somebody up. Like, you can go and give anyone a rah-rah speech. Oh, you can do it. You're amazing. This is, you can do that and it will work for like a good 5 or 10 minutes. They'll be like, oh, I've got this. I'm awesome. I'm on it. But then they have to go back into that space again. So giving them the mental ability to move out of that pathway is certainly a way that you can help an individual, an organization, anything like that. It's going to have to come within, and it's going to be the spirit within the individual or the organization that helps move them forward. Keeping your own boundaries is also super, super important in this work, not just with the clientele that you're working with, but also within the organization you're working with, and sometimes in the intimate relationships that you have. You are whole. You are created whole, and you are capable in your wholeness of sustaining yourself, and you need to keep that in mind. You do, sometimes for me, I'll have to look at something like I mentally have to put myself above the situation and say, okay, I can't control the environment this person is going back into. What can I control in this situation? I can control the fact that they have an outlet so that they have someone to help them, and I can control the piece where I'm trying to empower them. Those are the two things that I can control in this moment. And then you kind of have to let go, because you, again, cannot walk in somebody else's shoes. And it's going to, believe it or not, diffuse your own power. You're unintentionally and intentionally diffusing your power when you start putting it off, that trying to change things that are not in your purview. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. And I appreciate the reference to the coworkers, because I think in our workspaces there is a lot of stress, and then in the constituencies that we serve there's a different level of stress, but the people that we're dealing with every day are usually coworkers.
Right.
Hey, we saw some other folks join the webinar. Welcome. We're jumping in and out because nonprofit schedules, and so join in with any questions or comments whenever you feel moved.
Thanks.
Anyone have a question? No? Okay, I'm going to...
Actually,
yeah,
actually I do, and I apologize. This is Caroline, and I was at a dental appointment, so I think, one, I probably sound funny because I'm numb on one entire side of my face, but I did join the call a little late because things ran long there. So I just want you don't need to recap them, but can you just tell me the captions for your first 2 points, because I joined right at the beginning of the third point.
Sure. So the idea that the position that I come from is that we're all spirit. And the main message I want everyone to give is to honor your own spiritual journey. So if there's anything that I say that doesn't resonate with you, please do not, please go with what is true for you. So the first part of spirituality is that you are a creator. You are a co-creator with spirit. You are creating. You are here to create a better world. And so what does that look like? A lot of people move to nonprofits because they feel value alignment with what the nonprofit work is. And you can often look at your own life and see where those pieces are. I talked about the work of Dr. King in terms of his ability to create a whole new narrative for a nation. And we have the ability to create new narratives for our organizations, for our own lives, for our own relationships. I look to him as the mentor because he managed to do it on such a large scale. And I think I always like to see the mentors in kind of the large scale space, because then you can break down and see how that applies to a smaller scale. So the first part of authentic spirituality is really to embrace the fact that you are a creator of the world that you're in. Dr. King's mentor was Gandhi. Gandhi had a saying, be the change you want in the world. And King definitely embraced that. And I think for all of us to move into the space we want to be in, that has to be our motto: be the change you want in the world. I'm glad you asked this question because it's giving me the ability to recap it in a different way than I said it before. And then the second piece is that we must have personal integrity. And it's not integrity the way that it's been presented kind of in the public forum, but it's more of integrating those pieces of ourselves that we don't like, or that we're embarrassed by, that have caused us shame. It could be addiction, it could be unhealthy relationships, it could be past behaviors, it can be anything, but those cannot be left unattended because they keep spiraling. So when something's in your energy field or whatever that you don't deal with, it just keeps on spinning right on out there. It's not resolved. Being resolved means that you're not giving it any more energy, is really what we're going for here. What you give energy to still exists. What you don't dies, if you think of it like a plant. But if something's unresolved mentally, physically, emotionally, whatever, it's going to keep spinning and it's going to keep siphoning off a lot of your energy, and you're not going to be integrated to the point where you're going to be as strong as you possibly could be. What I didn't mention before, and the second one, is that the mentor I use for this one a lot is Lincoln. Lincoln had depression. Lincoln also had to deal with the Civil War. And that's kind of how I think of this space, is you are at war with yourself when you haven't maintained a level of integrity. You you end up being your biggest problem. So, and then the third one, I think you said you came in on, which was J.K. Rowling. So,
yeah.
Yep. Did you have a question? I'm sorry.
No, I was just confirming. Yes, that is, I heard all of J.K. Rowling.
Okay.
And I love, Kristin, what you said about, the debt, when you're in debt and you're in controlled by some other force, or the U.S. and our addiction to oil, that puts in a different perspective for me, that concept of integration, because you do make different decisions. We make different policy decisions and war and peace decisions every day because of our addiction to oil in this country. And so I was thinking about it on a personal level, but institutionally, and for the nonprofits that we work at and the issues that we're addressing, it's nice to be sunny, blue sky, no external forces thinking, but we have to live with real people in the real world and understand that not everybody is integrated.
No, and we find pieces, I find pieces of myself frequently that are not integrated, and I have to say, okay, what is this about? One thing to keep in mind too is anything you see on a macro level, you're going to see on a micro level. So it's going to run the gamut. So if you see a sickness in society, you're going to see a similar sickness in an individual. If you see a sickness in an individual, you're going to see different aspects of that in a society. Just kind of the way things work. So, there's a great poem, which I don't have in front of me, but it's like, if you want to have peace in the world, have peace within yourself, because you're going to radiate out whatever those aspects are. So a lot of the work and that's what authentic spirituality is. It's about doing the work to get you in order so that when you go out into the world, you're in great order, which brings me to my last piece of authentic spirituality. And this one is the manifestation piece. This one is the piece of being able to take who you are and then manifest that out in the world. And the mentor for me for this one is Oprah, because you see a woman who has grown, like her spirituality is, she's way into that space, and she's managed to continually manifest in different iterations. It's so interesting to see if you follow her career path. She dropped out of college because she got a job offer that was in alignment with what she wanted to do, which was to do newscasting. So she took that job in Tennessee, and then I don't know all the pieces, but she eventually ended up in Baltimore, Maryland. Now, she went to a hair salon, and the hair salon typically did white women's hair. And so they decided to do her hair like they would do a white woman's hair. Well, that caused all of her hair to fall out. So then she had to go on Baltimore TV, bald. Like the woman was doing the news without any hair because of all this. And you have to figure, if you're willing to go through all these steps and do that, like, how strong are you, right? So eventually she ends up in Chicago, which is where I first had contact with her, because I lived in Chicago in the late 70s really late 70s, moved to North Carolina in 82. And she was big. I mean, she was just starting to get really big at that time. She had a talk show. We all watched it. And then she kind of expanded out from there. Then her show became big, then her radio station, then her magazine. Now she's got her own network. So that's the manifestation piece is a growth. It's a natural growth of your spirit. So what does that look like? It starts super small. It doesn't, you're not going to go out and be Oprah. You're going to go out and you're going to be you, but you're going to be you in these different iterations. And that's when you see that's why we do all the back work, right? Make sure we've got our integration, make sure we've, Oprah has more, I don't want to call them skeletons in the closet because it makes them sound like they're hidden. Like, she's opened it up. She's opened it up publicly. All these things that could possibly derail her, she's like laid out, and she's like, yeah, so I tried crack. Yeah, so I had a baby when I was 14. Yeah, so like, stuff that other people would be like, oh my God, I could never admit that. She's like, yeah, it's part of who I am. It's part of what got me where I am. And so, in my opinion, you see her kind of going through all these steps in a very interesting way, and kind of also being a good mentor to show us how to manifest what is our spirit out into the world. So I'm sorry, I kind of took up all our time. We're coming up late here. Any questions in the last few minutes? Comments?
Well, I think I ate into some of your time, so I do appreciate the recap, and this was very informative and helpful. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you found it helpful, and I would love for you to eat it more time. I'd prefer to be conversing as opposed to me talking. Ayana, any thoughts? You were here with us the whole time.
I think that the integration piece was definitely the most helpful for me.
Hi, Cade.
Hello. Because as I was saying in the beginning, like, those pieces of my spirituality and my upbringing were just kind of fragmented, and I have work to do.
Yeah.
I have work to do.
But to get back, and this is such a nice way to kind of return at the end, follow the joy. What is the joy? And if you follow the joy, the integration will come with that. And be authentic to yourself. Because your spirit, the way. You do. A religion can inform you, but I think one of the best analogies I heard was, if you think of religion as software packages like Excel, Word, Adobe, whatever, those are religions. The CPU, or the central processing unit, is what spirit is. So it can run all those programs. You can get to it by all those programs. This is Joseph Campbell's work, by the way, it's not mine. But it's just, what programs are you trying to run? They're all going to lead you there.
I've heard a nature analogy around water, like that spirit is the groundwater, and it comes out in different ways. It's a geyser, it's a lake, it's a river, it's an ocean. And those might be the religions or the form that it takes, but it's all love, it's all water, it's all the same sort of ground element that just comes out in different ways.
Yeah, I like that.
I like that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Kristin. This is such a great injection of inspiration into my day for sure, and hopefully a few others. And when folks listen to it, they can take what they want from this conversation, even though they weren't a part of it directly. But I'm just so grateful to you, and love that you bring not only the spirit from our college and environmental days, but your own community organizing days in DC, and from your studies in speaking and writing. And I encourage all of you to check out Kristin's website, and she does all sorts of different kinds of coaching that I don't even know about, but check her out. And we'll keep you updated on the pilot and how it goes. We're trying to figure out the interplay of physical health, mental health, team health, and how it supports us all as workers so that we can be the change we want to see in the world.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, Susan, thank you for putting this together. I know that the community, the nonprofit community, is going to eat this up, because we certainly, when I was working for a nonprofit, needed this more than anything. So thank you.
It's the weirdest thing that it's not already being sort of addressed in some, formal way, but we'll try and get some lessons learned out there and make it a more of a focus in our nonprofits, because we need to support ourselves and support each other. So thanks for your help with that. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And Diana and our guests, thank you for joining us. And to everybody listening, go follow your joy.
Yes. Well, thank you all so much. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Bye.
I'm going to stop recording.